The security camera footage would later reveal what no one in that crowded corporate lobby could have known, that in the span of 3 silent gestures, everything was about to change. Marcus Chen stood in the marble-floored atrium of Chen Technologies, his tailored suit and confident posture marking him as someone important, though most of the bustling crowd didn't recognize the CEO himself. He preferred it that way. The quarterly shareholder meeting had just concluded, and Marcus was making his way toward the executive elevators when he noticed the man. He was thin, weathered beyond his years, with hollow cheeks and eyes that darted nervously around the lobby. His jacket was torn at the shoulder, and he clutched a backpack to his chest like a lifeline. But what caught Marcus's attention wasn't the man's disheveled appearance, it was the small boy beside him, no more than 7 years old, with dark curls and wide, frightened eyes that reminded Marcus achingly of someone he'd lost long ago. The man was speaking to one of the receptionists, his voice rising in desperation. "Please, I just need to speak to someone in human resources. I applied for the custodial position 3 weeks ago, and I was told. Sir, I've already explained that without an appointment, I cannot. My son hasn't eaten since yesterday. I just need to know if I got the job. Please." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He began walking toward them, but then something made him freeze. The way the man's hand moved to his backpack. The wild look in his eyes. The receptionist's face going pale. And then Marcus saw it, just for a split second, the glint of metal as the zipper opened slightly. His blood ran cold, but years of maintaining composure in crisis situations kept his face neutral. The lobby was filled with at least 50 people. Security guards were stationed at both exits, but they hadn't noticed yet. Any sudden movement could trigger a catastrophe. Marcus's mind raced through scenarios, each one ending badly. His hand instinctively moved toward his phone to alert security, but then he noticed something else. The little boy was moving his hands. Not randomly, but deliberately. Signing. Marcus's breath caught. Sign language. The boy was deaf, and Marcus understood every gesture. Growing up, Marcus's younger brother, David, had been deaf. Marcus had learned ASL fluently, and even though David had died in a car accident 15 years ago, Marcus had never forgotten the language that had been their private world, their special connection. He still signed to himself sometimes when he was alone, still dreamed conversations with his brother in flowing hand movements. The boy was signing to his father, who clearly didn't understand, his hands clumsy and uncertain as he tried to respond. The child's movements were frantic, scared, want to go home, hungry. Marcus made a split-second decision. He walked forward, not toward security, but toward the man and his son. As he approached, he began signing to the boy, his movements smooth and natural. "Hello, my name is Marcus. What's your name?" The boy's eyes went wide with shock and relief. Someone understood him. His small hands flew into motion. "Elijah, my daddy is upset. We need help." Marcus kept his face calm, friendly, as he continued signing while speaking aloud casually, as if having a pleasant conversation. "Elijah, I want to help you and your daddy. Can you tell me what's in your daddy's bag?" The boy's face crumpled, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Our stuff. We've been living in our car. Daddy brought his tools because he thought if he showed them he could fix things, they would give him the job. He has a nail gun in there. He's a carpenter, but no one will hire him because we have to bring me everywhere and I can't." Here, Marcus felt his heart shatter and reform in the same moment. Not a weapon, a nail gun, a desperate man's last attempt to prove his worth, to feed his child. But Marcus knew how that nail gun would look to security. How fast things could escalate. How quickly this frightened father could make a terrible mistake if he felt cornered. He glanced at the receptionist and then at the security guards who were now watching the situation with increasing tension. Marcus made brief eye contact with his head of security, James, a former FBI agent who'd worked with Marcus for a decade. James knew that look. It meant, "Trust me. Stand by but don't engage." Marcus turned to the father and spoke gently. "Excuse me, sir, I couldn't help but overhear. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm the CEO of this company." The man's face went from desperate to terrified. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble. I know," Marcus said softly. "You applied for a custodial position. What's your name?" "Thomas. Thomas, right. Well, Thomas, I happen to know we've been struggling to fill several positions, and there's been a communication breakdown in our hiring process. I'd like to apologize for that." Marcus kept his voice steady, calming. "I also noticed you're carrying some tools. Are you a carpenter by trade?" Thomas nodded, his grip on the backpack loosening slightly. "Yes, sir. 20 years. I did commercial work, residential, everything. But I had to leave my last job when my wife—" His voice broke. "When my wife passed, Elijah's mother, she was the only one who could really communicate with him, and I couldn't leave him anywhere, and childcare for a deaf child is expensive, and I understand," Marcus interrupted gently. Then he did something that made everyone in the lobby hold their breath. He reached out slowly and placed his hand on the backpack. "May I?" Thomas hesitated, then nodded, releasing his desperate grip. Marcus carefully took the bag, unzipped it, and pulled out the nail gun, some hand tools, and a few personal belongings, a change of clothes, a plastic bag with crackers, a small stuffed elephant that was clearly Elijah's. Marcus handed the bag to James, who'd approached quietly. "Please secure these tools in my office," he said clearly, making sure Thomas understood they weren't being confiscated. "Mr. Wright is going to need them for work." He turned back to Thomas. "Here's what's going to happen. First, my assistant is going to take you and Elijah to our employee cafeteria, where you're both going to have a proper meal. While you're eating, I'm going to have our HR director review your application. Then we're going to talk about employment opportunities, not just custodial positions, but where your actual skills can be utilized." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I can't. I don't understand." Marcus looked down at Elijah, who was watching with wide, hopeful eyes. Marcus signed to him, "Everything is going to be okay now. I promise." Elijah signed back, "You know my language." "Yes," Marcus signed. "My brother was deaf. He taught me. You remind me of him." The boy's face lit up with the first real smile Marcus had seen. "Can you teach my daddy? He tries but he doesn't know enough words." Marcus felt a lump in his throat. "Yes, we'll help with that too." He turned to his assistant, Jennifer, who'd appeared at his side. "Please escort Mr. Wright and Elijah to the executive dining room. Order whatever they want. Then contact Sarah in HR and have her bring Thomas's file to my office immediately. Also, call Drive Petra Morrison from the Education Foundation. I want to discuss programs for Elijah. And book a suite at the Hilton for tonight under my account." Jennifer nodded, but Thomas was shaking his head, overwhelmed. "Sir, this is too much. I don't deserve." "Stop," Marcus said firmly but kindly. "You came here looking for work, not a handout. You're a skilled carpenter willing to prove your worth. You're a father trying to provide for his son. That deserves respect, not charity. This is about doing what's right and recognizing value when it walks through our doors." 2 hours later, Marcus sat in his office across from Thomas Wright, who looked transformed. A good meal, a shower in the executive gym facilities, and clean clothes from the company store had given him back some dignity. But more than that, hope had returned to his eyes. "Mr. Wright, I've reviewed your work history. Your references from before your wife's death are exceptional. You have skills we need. We're actually renovating 3 floors of this building and expanding our manufacturing facilities. I'm not offering you a custodial position. I'm offering you a position as a facilities carpenter, with full benefits, including health insurance and tuition assistance." Thomas's hands shook. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. The position starts Monday. Your starting salary is $65,000, with performance reviews every 6 months. We also have an on-site childcare facility that includes specialists trained in ASL and working with deaf children. Elijah can stay there while you work, and they'll help him with his education and communication skills. I don't have a place to live. We've been in my car for 3 weeks." Marcus leaned forward. "Our company has a partnership with a housing assistance program for employees. We can help you secure an apartment. First month's rent will be covered as part of your hiring bonus. After that, it comes from your salary, but it'll be manageable." Thomas buried his face in his hands and sobbed. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs of relief, of gratitude, of a man who'd been drowning and suddenly found himself able to breathe again. When he finally composed himself, he looked at Marcus with red-rimmed eyes. "Why?" Why would you do all this for a stranger? Marcus was quiet for a moment, memories washing over him. David's laugh. The way his hands moved so expressively. The funeral where Marcus had stood silently, unable to speak the words, only able to sign his goodbye to a brother who could no longer see him. 15 years ago, my little brother died, Marcus said slowly. He was deaf, brilliant, funny, full of life. But the world wasn't always kind to him. People made assumptions. They saw his disability before they saw his abilities. He struggled to find work, to be taken seriously, to just exist in a world that wasn't built for him. Marcus's voice thickened. The night he died, we'd had dinner together. He told me he'd finally found a job, a real job where they valued him. He was so happy. On his way home, a drunk driver ran a red light. David didn't hear the car coming. Thomas's face filled with compassion. I'm so sorry. I made a promise at his funeral, Marcus continued, that I would use whatever influence I had to make the world more accessible, more understanding, more humane. Not just for people with disabilities, but for anyone struggling, anyone overlooked, anyone judged by their circumstances rather than their character. He looked directly at Thomas. When I saw Elijah signing today, I saw my brother. When I saw your desperation, I didn't see a threat, I saw a father. And I realized that everything I'd built, all of this, he gestured around the office, means nothing if I can't use it to honor the promise I made to David. Thomas wiped his eyes. I will work harder than anyone in this building. I swear to you, I know you will, but I'm also going to ask something of you. Marcus pulled out a folder. I want to create a program here, a formal initiative to recruit and support skilled workers who are facing temporary hardships. Single parents, people with disabilities, those recovering from personal tragedies. I want you to help me design it. You understand these challenges in a way I never fully can. Thomas stared at the folder, then at Marcus. You want me to help create company policy. I want you to help create change. Real, meaningful change. Are you interested? For the first time since his wife's death, Thomas Wright felt something beyond survival. He felt purpose. Yes, absolutely yes. The story could have ended there, a feel-good moment frozen in time. But what happened next surprised everyone, including Marcus. Thomas Wright didn't just become a model employee. He became a force of transformation within Chen Technologies. His carpentry work was impeccable, but his real contribution was his insight into creating an inclusive workplace. Within 6 months, the company had launched the Second Chance Initiative, a program that provided employment opportunities, training, and support services to individuals facing significant barriers to employment. Elijah thrived in the company's childcare program, his bright personality shining once he was in an environment where communication wasn't a constant struggle. He became a favorite among all the employees, his presence a reminder of why the work mattered. But the story that really captured hearts came a year later, when Marcus was preparing for a major product launch. He'd been working grueling hours, his stress levels climbing, when Elijah appeared at his office door with his father. The boy approached Marcus's desk and began signing rapidly, his father translating. Mr. Marcus, my daddy says you look like you looked when you first met us. Sad in your eyes. He says you miss your brother. I made you something to remember that he would be proud of you. Elijah handed Marcus a drawing. It showed 2 figures, clearly Marcus and David based on the labels in childish handwriting. They were holding hands, and above them, in carefully copied letters, were the words, Brothers Forever. Love never ends. Marcus's composure cracked completely. He knelt down to Elijah's level and signed, This is the most precious gift anyone has ever given me. Thank you. Elijah signed back, You saved me and my daddy. You're a hero. Marcus shook his head and signed, No, buddy. Your daddy is the hero. He never gave up on you. That's real love. The drawing went into a frame on Marcus's desk, where it remained as a constant reminder of why he did what he did. The security footage from that day in the lobby went viral after an employee leaked it to the media, though they carefully edited out the details about the nail gun to protect Thomas's privacy. The video showed only the moment when Marcus began signing to Elijah, the boy's face lighting up, and the subsequent compassionate interaction that transformed a crisis into a miracle. The story was picked up by news outlets worldwide. CEO uses sign language to connect with deaf boy in need, became an international sensation. But Marcus consistently redirected attention away from himself and toward the larger issues: the need for accessible workplaces, the importance of compassion in corporate culture, the countless families struggling in silence. Chen Technologies became known not just for its innovative products but for its innovative humanity. Other companies began reaching out, wanting to implement similar programs. Thomas Wright, who'd once lived in his car, became a sought-after consultant on inclusive hiring practices. But perhaps the most profound change was personal. Marcus had spent 15 years mourning his brother, feeling that the world had lost something irreplaceable when David died. Now, through Elijah, through Thomas, through the dozens of families they'd helped through the Second Chance initiative, Marcus realized that David's legacy wasn't about what was lost, it was about what could be given. 3 years after that fateful day in the lobby, Marcus stood before a crowd of employees, program participants, and media at the dedication of the David Chen Center for Inclusive Employment, a training facility and resource center funded by Chen Technologies to help companies across the country create more accessible and compassionate workplaces. Elijah, now 10 and confident, stood beside Marcus and signed the opening remarks while speaking aloud, his speech therapy having progressed remarkably. Thomas Wright, now the director of the Second Chance Initiative, gave the keynote address. 3 years ago, I walked into this building desperate and afraid, Thomas told the crowd. I thought I needed a job. What I received was a second chance at life. But more than that, I received something I'd stopped believing existed, proof that compassion isn't weakness in business. It's the ultimate strength. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus Chen saw past my desperation to my humanity. He saw past my son's disability to his potential. And in doing so, he reminded me that we all have value, we all deserve dignity, and we all have something to contribute if someone will just give us the chance. After the ceremony, as people mingled and celebrated, Elijah found Marcus standing alone, looking at a portrait of David that hung in the center's lobby, a smiling young man with kind eyes and hands frozen mid-sign. The boy tugged Marcus's sleeve and signed, "Is he happy? Your brother." About all this, Marcus knelt down, as he always did when talking to Elijah, looking him directly in the eyes. He signed slowly, "I think he's happy that something good came from missing him. I think he's happy that his life, and even his death, meant something. And I think he's happy that I met you and your dad." "Why?" Elijah signed. "Because you helped me understand that love doesn't end. It transforms. It becomes action. It becomes change. It becomes the way we treat each other." Marcus smiled. "My brother taught me to see differently, to communicate differently, to understand that there are many ways to be heard in this world. You reminded me of those lessons when I needed them most." Elijah threw his arms around Marcus's neck, and Marcus held him tight, this beautiful boy who'd walked into his life at exactly the right moment, whose silent words had spoken volumes, whose presence had healed wounds Marcus hadn't known were still bleeding. That night, alone in his office, Marcus looked at the security footage he'd kept from that day 3 years ago. He watched the moment he first saw Elijah signing. The moment he made the choice to approach rather than alert security. The moment everything changed. He thought about how close they'd all come to tragedy, how a nail gun could have been mistaken for a weapon, how fear could have overridden compassion, how a desperate father might have made things worse in his panic, how a system could have failed a family that just needed one person to see them as human. And he thought about David, his brilliant, beautiful brother who'd lived in a world that often didn't know how to make space for him. Marcus signed into the empty office, his hands moving in the language of love and loss. "I kept my promise. I made it matter. And I won't stop." The next morning, Marcus received an email from a CEO in London who'd read about the David Chen Center and wanted to implement a similar program. Then one from Tokyo. Then Sao Paulo. Then Mumbai. The ripple effect of that single moment. In the lobby, when a CEO chose compassion over caution, when sign language became a bridge instead of a barrier, when a frightened father and his hungry son found an advocate instead of an adversary, continued to spread. And somewhere, Marcus liked to imagine, David was signing his approval, his hands moving in the eternal language of love. "Well done, big brother. Well done."